southern. He got spring training. So as soon as it's over, he's ready. I'm talking about travel. The new coach. Yeah. Long time. I stand. What's the last name? City Cup? What that is now? Spring. Where you from? I'm from
introduce you if you're ready.
Yeah.
If I can come up to the mic and then I'll
Okay.
bring you in. All right, everyone, if we're ready to get started here in just a second. Just a reminder to please silence your phones and that questions can only be asked by press club members and members of the working media. Today we have Ronnie Morris with us. Ronnie and his wife Allison have enjoyed lifelong careers with ExxonMobil. Ronnie retired to Baton Rouge in 2021 after a 25-year career. Mr. Morris is an elected member of Louisiana State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, representing EBR, Livingston, Ascension, and Tangi parishes. He currently serves as the BESE president. He earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from LSU in 1995 and graduated from the LSU Flores MBA program in 2017. And a lifelong learner, Ronnie is working on his doctorate degree in educational leadership at Vanderbilt University Peabody College of Education, which he expects to finish in 2025. Mr. Morris?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Shannon, and members of the Baton Rouge Press Club for this opportunity to share with you today my experience serving on BESE. So my first topic is BESE turns 50. So the headline is BESE turns 50. Your question might be the same as my wife. 5 years ago, I was approached to run for BESE. I brought the conversation home, and Allison asked me, Ronnie, what's BESE? I talked to my friends and my family, and they asked me the same thing. Ronnie, what's BESE? And over time, I found that most people in our state are not familiar with BESE. They don't know what it does or what it's responsible for. Well, 50 years ago, the state constitution created the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to adopt and enact policies governing the elementary and secondary schools of Louisiana. I'm told that public education was one of the more controversial topics of the convention. I was only in elementary school at the time. The option ultimately passed by voters created an 11-member BESE to oversee K-12 education and post-secondary vocational and technical education in special schools. It also created the Board of Regents to oversee higher education, and it created the Board of Supervisors for the LSU and UL systems. Today, BESE is still composed of 11 members. 8 members are elected from each one of the state's 8 BESE districts at the same time as the gubernatorial election. 3 members are appointed by the governor to represent the state at large. These members must be confirmed by the Louisiana Senate. Currently, the board elects a president, vice president, and secretary-treasurer. BESE serves about 680,000 students attending public schools, 130,000 attending non-public schools, and about 17,000 homeschool children. The board has many responsibilities that are outlined in state law, including, but not limited to, developing statewide K-12 policies and regulations that govern the operations of public and non-public schools. The state hires the state superintendent of education and directs all planning functions of the Department of Education. The LDOE is essentially the administrative arm of BESE, implementing policies and initiatives as directed by the board. BESE also exercises budgetary and fiscal control over state and federal funds for education programs and services at K-12 schools. Annually, BESE prepares and adopts a minimum foundation program. It's presented to the legislature for approval and equitably allocates dollars to schools and school districts. And finally, BESE provides for the development and implementation of a school and district accountability system. The mission of BESE is to provide leadership and create policies for education that expand opportunities for children, empower families and communities, and advance Louisiana in an increasingly competitive global market. But as we all know, over the last 50 years, that's been a very challenging mission. For years, the status quo gave us relief with "Thank God for Mississippi, we're not last." However, today that chant has a new meaning. With a 7-year commitment to literacy education, Mississippi jumped from 49 to 29 nationally in 4th grade reading. Now, "Thank God for Mississippi" translates to "Louisiana, you can do it too." So I ask you, stop and pause for a minute and think about a community where its citizens identify crime and poverty as their primary concerns. The East Baton Rouge District Attorney's Office reported 97 homicides in 2019, the year before COVID. 90% of the victims and 90% of the perpetrators did not finish 9th grade. While 60% of the planet is bilingual, only 60% of the K-3 students in our community read their native language at grade level. We're the most powerful and the most generous country in the world. But here in the 21st century in the United States of America, and 40% of our children are not literate in their native language. So if our model is K-3 teach them to read, and 4 through 12 they can read to learn, what kind of outcomes can we really expect? While you're still in that pause, think about the kind of options you would have if you couldn't read the English language. How would you provide for your family? So what are we doing about it? BESE, LDOE, legislators, and stakeholder groups have all prioritized literacy initiatives as a critical need, particularly those promoting early literacy. Shannon, can you help me with the slide? So I would direct you to this slide. So in the national rankings, the most recent numbers that we have, Louisiana is #1 in the country in 4th grade reading growth. I want to repeat that. Louisiana is #1. Economically disadvantaged students improved from 42nd to 11th nationally. Overall ranking, 46 to 42. Another independent ranking from U.S. News and World Report. Louisiana pre-K through 12 education improved from 46 to 41. So 41. This is a new conversation in Louisiana. We're on the threshold of becoming a 3rd quartile performer in K through 12 education. This is a new conversation. And think about where we can go from here. But this didn't happen accidentally. Louisiana now requires all K through 3 teachers and administrators to participate in early literacy training, and requires the training to be based on the science of reading. The state now requires all school systems and schools to develop a literacy plan. The state provides resources and guidance for the creation of these plans. BESE has adopted policy requiring public school governing authorities to provide for literacy coaches for reading teachers in K through 3, and to provide on-site teacher training on evidence-based reading instruction. The board has adopted the state's first accountability system for kindergarten through 2nd grade. This system closes a gap in the existing accountability system and is part of a comprehensive literacy strategy that emphasizes the science of reading in Louisiana classrooms. BESE has also adopted a summer literacy policy to support 3rd and 4th grade students reading behind grade level. 3rd and 4th grade students will take an end-of-year literacy assessment. Students who score below grade level will receive a minimum of 30 hours of focused literacy instruction during the summer. Students not on reading level and who do not participate in the summer program may be retained, or instead of retention, receive other means of support as determined by school officials and parents. Moving to my second topic, priorities and looking ahead. In my service on the BESE board, I've enjoyed also working as a substitute teacher. When I talk to students, I reach out to them, explain to them I'm a BESE member, this is what BESE does, and then I tell them, you just got elected to BESE. You can change any rule. You can create a brand new rule that benefits the student learning experience. What are you going to do? And the response, it doesn't matter if I go to the worst performing school or the best performing school. I get the same two responses. The first one, Mr. Morris, can you find me a teacher? The second one, Mr. Morris, can you make education relevant? Now go back to your pause. You're trying to convince a student with poor attendance that going to school is a great opportunity to discover their interest and to find innovative approaches that make education relevant. The student replies, well, I can't read and there's no teacher when I get there. I don't think any of us want to sell that one. But when I think about the student's response, let's imagine K-12 education as a three-legged stool. Leg number one, quality educators in every classroom. Leg number two, quality academic standards and curriculum. In level number three, student engagement. So let's start with level number one, high quality educators. 3 years ago, Louisiana was short 2,500 teachers. BESE and LDOE worked with our state legislators, and 6 different initiatives were created to address the teacher shortage. The next year, we cut it by 50% with implementation of those initiatives, but we're still short 1,250 teachers. Currently, we're short 1,000 teachers in the state of Louisiana. BESE will continue to work with legislators, school systems, and higher ed to increase teacher compensation, relieve teachers of scripted protocol and administrative tasks, and provide them more time for classroom instruction. The second leg, quality academic standards and curriculum. I've already shared one example of quality curriculum and instruction. With implementation of the science of reading, we've seen significant improvements in 4th grade reading, and we expect to see additional improvements as this quality improvement step is implemented by trained professionals, our teachers. The third and arguably the most critical leg of the stool is student engagement. The most recent data from LDOE, the average truancy rate in the state of Louisiana is 45%. I want to repeat that. The average truancy rate in the state of Louisiana today is 45%. Question number one, how is it even possible? Question number two, how is it possible and nobody's talking about it? We can establish high expectations for students, but if they're not in the classroom, they will not reach those expectations. And if they're not in the classroom, where are they? In response, the LDOE has created the STAR Task Force to address the truancy issue. BESE and LDOE are actively reviewing statute and policy related to truancy and attendance. We're identifying critical barriers related to attendance, reviewing statewide and system-level attendance data, and working to develop strategies to reduce chronic absenteeism and truancy. So I think we can all agree, attendance is fundamental to student engagement. So what's next? How do we make education relevant for Louisiana students? I left my cell phone in my bag, but they all have one of those, right? So they already have all the answers. They need help with critical thinking skills and problem solving. We also need to help them with vision for career and college readiness. It's been a long and tedious conversation in Baton Rouge about building a new bridge. I would ask you to consider another bridge, the bridge connecting K-12 education and workforce. Today, 80% of Louisiana high school students are on a college-bound pathway, but only 50% actually go to college, and only 40% return for year 2. What happens to the 30% that leave high school with no skill and no college. Or those that don't make it past year one and they bring the college debt with them to join their friends in that boat. That boat is sinking. And what about you? You thought about that air conditioning repair bill that was expensive? Electrician? Called a plumber lately? If we don't help our students appreciate some of these career opportunities and work with community partners to develop internships and apprenticeships, that repair bill is going to be much more expensive. And you're going to have to wait for the repairman to come from Mississippi, Arkansas, or Texas. BESE can and will address this concern by working with LDOE, the Louisiana Workforce Commission, and our community partners to build a bridge that will help students to appreciate these opportunities as they approach the bridge. Recognize the ability to change lanes as they approach the top of the bridge. And connect with employers for intern and apprenticeship opportunities on the other side of the bridge. And make adjustments to accountability system that incentivize school systems to support these opportunities. We can also take innovative approaches to education, leveraging technology to provide experiential learning opportunities. And that brings me to my final topic, artificial intelligence. Last year, BESE expanded the role of its School Innovation and Turnaround Committee and directed the LDOE to bring a minimum of 4 innovative education concepts or practices to the committee for review and discuss each year. This year, BESE will be adopting the state's first set of academic standards for computer science. BESE received the report from the Computer Science Education Advisory Commission in October 23 and directed the LDOE to begin the process of creating a state plan for computer science education. Louisiana's computer science standards will ensure graduates apply analytical and critical thinking skills to real-world situations, demonstrate digital literacy and digital citizenship skills, and use technology skills as employable citizens to meet present and future workforce demands. The Standards Committee will begin meeting in person in Baton Rouge in April, and it'll continue through July. Draft standards will be made available for public review, and public input will be sought and collected throughout the process. Recommended standards are expected to be brought to BESE for consideration by October 2024. And most recently, the board has been considering the potential applications and impact of artificial intelligence in K-12 education. AI is already creating fundamental shifts in the classroom. Many students are on the cutting edge, but the adults are sitting in the bleachers trying to figure out the rules for the game. BESE and the LDOE are taking a proactive approach to establishing best practices and regulation. We must establish a policy framework that leverages these tools to the benefit of students and educators while identifying and avoiding unintended consequences. When discussing the issues of AI in K-12 education, there are 2 critical conversations. The first one is ethics. When is it okay to use it and to what extent? In K-12 education, sometimes we just want to know what's going on in here. But there's other times when the how is important. How to most effectively use AI so it can help our teachers and our students understand the value of the tool. So when they go to solve a problem, sometimes they reach into their toolbox and they pull out the calculator. That's the appropriate tool. Sometimes they reach into their toolbox and they pull out the laptop because it's the appropriate tool. But going forward, they're going to have to know how to go into their toolbox and find the AI tool and bring it out and know how to use it. So there are a number of opportunities with the how conversation. AI can be used to facilitate personalized learning solutions and can be of particular value in special education. AI can assist teachers with administrative tasks such as attendance tracking, communication with parents, scheduling, student performance reports, creating more time for them to focus on classroom instruction. Instilling AI literacy as part of the students' K-12 education experience will better prepare them to leverage the technology in the future. And the example I would give you is, I want to put in a plug for Khan Academy. I had lunch with Sal Khan a couple of months ago, and he demonstrated Khan Migo, which is their AI tutor. So instead of a scripted response with an answer to a question, it suggests, would you try this? Would you consider that? What if we doubled this number? So it's very much, my experience, it was very much like working with a human tutor. Can you imagine a classroom with a teacher and every student has a personal tutor at their side? Internally, LDOE has hired a dedicated staffing resource to provide guidance going forward. Mr. Adam DiBenedetto is the new Director of Academic Innovation. Additionally, LDOE is forming a new AI task force, which will also begin meeting in March. And the Southern Regional Educational Board, SREB, has formed a 16-state AI and Education Commission. The group will assemble leaders in education and business to chart a course for how AI is used in classrooms and how to prepare a workforce that's being transformed by technology. The two-year commission will begin meeting in March. Board of Regents, BESE, and the legislature will each have one representative on the commission. That concludes my comments. Glad to take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Morris, legislatively, is there any bills that you are supporting, or do you feel that the legislature maybe needs to focus some dollars on different aspects of education to help with the programs you laid out there?
Well, we met on the current slate of bills as they've been filed on Friday, and obviously that list is building every day. So the list I've seen to date is 65 or so. And Lance Harris, who's vice president of BESE now, told me that his committee, he was a former chair of the Education Committee in the House, that they reviewed 174 education bills last session. So I expect there's going to be quite a few en route. But to date, I think that what we've seen is very supportive of the vision for this board going forward, addressing the issues I spoke to here today. We'll see, what's coming. But so far, we're very encouraged by what we've seen. There's a lot of opportunity around school choice, which we fully support as a board. It's one of the most heartbreaking things I've seen and stories that I've heard, is to see a single mom put their child on the bus for 12 years to go to an F school. We can do better than that. So we fully support the school choice items. Obviously, truancy is a big concern. We want to work that, so we're looking forward to see what's ahead of us. Yes, sir.
Yes. And some great ideas, but what do you believe to be done to further incentivize teachers or young people graduating high school to pursue careers in education? Because I know some people rather close to me who are in education, they teach, and sometimes they have to take extra classes in because there just aren't enough teachers to fill the spots. What could be done just for the long run to kind of curb that gap?
Right. So they're coming out of the legislation in 2022. There were 6 different initiatives that were started to help with the teacher pipeline. Happy to meet with you afterwards. I can go through the whole list of 6, but there were 6 initiatives that came out. A lot of that starts in middle school. And it's not just the teaching career, right? It's other schools as well, but we need to do a better job putting those opportunities in front of our kids and giving them some sense of what's next and help them to identify with their interest. But we need a focused effort to do that. And I'm happy to go through those 6 items with you afterwards. Yes, ma'am.
How did the summer literacy program go? How successful or unsuccessful was the summer literacy program?
I haven't seen results of that. The thing that encourages me about that process is that now the state has a single literacy screener. So when the student comes in at the first of the school year, K through 3, then they take a baseline test. So you know where every child starts. Then from that test, there are diagnostic outcomes. So we know the child is weak in this area, the child is weak in that area. And so there are intervention steps that are specifically tied to those diagnostics. Then at midterm, the same screener is conducted, and then you get the answer to your question was, okay, how much progress did we make in that school year using those diagnostic intervention steps, and where do we land at midterm? And then at end of school year, they take the screener again. So we can see over the course of the whole school year, the progress that a student has made in areas that we've identified as specific weaknesses for individual students. I hope that helps.
Well, and then they go to the summer program?
It depends on that final assessment at spring, right? At the end of the school year. If they're still below grade level, then the summer program is an opportunity for them. Yes, ma'am.
I read that parents were offered the opportunity for those children who were not meeting that third grade measure to get reading assistance, and they didn't participate, and the numbers were alarming.
You might be referring to the Steve Carter program. So there's there are multiple approaches, but one is in school and one is out of school. So in school, we want to use the diagnostic tool to understand, where the weaknesses are, and then provide intervention inside the school. But there's also a separate program, the Steve Carter program, which helps students after school. So these dollars were set aside so that if parents recognize they have the need, then the funding is available. So that was made available. There wasn't a real strong response to it, but it was made available. And I think there were a lot of learnings from that as well. So we're working through that to help make it more available to parents. But the main thing here that I'm really impressed with is that the quality control measure. So we know that all of these teachers, all of these vendors, the tutors, right, have got the science of reading training. So the results show that it works, right? So that quality control measure is critical for our success going forward. Yes, sir.
Sounds certainly like there are a number of programs going forward to address primarily the reading issue. But when you look at the number of where Louisiana ranks overall in education relative to other states, what is fundamentally different about Louisiana that causes that to happen, and how do you address that?
Well, I think first of all, I would say it depends on which national ranking group you're talking about, because they've all got different. But I mean, they've all got different criteria, right? There's not a standard criteria that I'm aware of that they all use. So there's different criteria. In Louisiana, at the high school level, the accountability system is fairly complex. At the 3 through 8 level, there's 3 components. There's an interest and opportunity component, which is 5%. Then there's the LEAP score test, which is basically a snapshot in time. You're at grade level or you're not. You're below grade level, you're better than grade level. And then there's the growth component. So currently the growth component is 25% of the 3 through 8 score. What the growth component does is it says, okay, you may or may not be at grade level, but how much did you grow in a school year? I've been in one high school in Baton Rouge that's dedicated to addressing high school students with literacy issues. There are hundreds of students in this school. The principal tells me the average literacy rate for an incoming freshman is 4th grade. Okay? So at the high school level, now we move on to the high school level. Get to the high school, you got to take into account the LEAP score, you take into account high school graduation rate, you take into account ACT. There are a number of different parameters that you take into account. Our focus going forward is career and college readiness. So one of the things that the last BESE did was we worked with Board of Regents and we aligned on a definition. So prior to last year, Louisiana did not have a definition for career and college readiness. We were one of 3 states in the SREB that had yet to define career and college readiness. So now we've come to a definition. We've shared that with this board, and now it's a much better conversation. If you want to hold somebody accountable for something, now it's defined. So we can start that conversation much narrower with more focus. And so that's what our approach is going to be now, is we recognize that in that definition, there's basically 3 parts. One part of it speaks to the things that the students on the college-bound track and the vocational track have in common. Then there's a definition for career readiness, which is the students that are graduating on a career pathway. What are expectations for that? And then finally, on the college-bound track, 45% of all incoming freshmen at Louisiana colleges and universities required a math remediation class. 45%. That is not college ready. But we didn't have it in the definition before. Now we do. So when you look at ACT scores, which is one of the things that these rank groups look at for high school graduates, that's a focus, right? How well are we preparing our kids for college?
Let me just ask, as a follow-up to that, I mean, I assume every state faces the same kind of issue that we just talked about. But what's different about Louisiana? I mean, it just seems that we have a harder time from coming out of the starting gate all the way through. And is it money? Is it teachers? Is it the approach?
Well, you hit on most of the major contributors, right? But I think the most fundamental thing is that we're in a recycle mode, right? We stay in this constant recycle mode with poverty and crime and high school dropouts, right? And we stay in this recycle mode, and we never get out of it. And so we're so far behind, we don't catch up because we stay in that same mode. You got a certain group of kids that just stay there, right? They're stagnant. And the other group of kids move through the system. So I think that's one of the main differences, is that stagnant group. Yes, ma'am.
With the governor indicating that the teacher stipend from last year would not be a permanent thing, and there probably would not be another teacher pay raise on the state level this year, are there concerns that that's going to hurt the efforts to try and fill those teacher gaps in the state right now?
Well, teacher pay is certainly a topic of conversation, and it should be. The MFP will come to BESE tomorrow for consideration. There's been a significant focus on meeting the greatest demand. And the greatest demand is math, science, and special education. So there's a proposal to provide additional funding for differentiated pay, right, so we can help to meet that higher demand. And it provides the districts with the autonomy to make those decisions themselves, because those demands are going to vary from district to district. So there should be some flexibility there. But I think there's more conversation coming around teacher pay. We all certainly support it, and we want to come up with the best solution as quickly as possible.
So does that mean that school districts would have the ability to say, increase pay for science teachers by a certain amount compared to what they would need for an English teacher if they don't need as many of those teachers compared to?
I think those funds will be available to meet the demand, whatever the demand happened to be at that particular district. Yes, sir.
And so to build on that, so what are your other expectations for the MFP in terms of where you expect it'll end up this year compared to last year, higher, lower? Just any other details about your expectations for the MFP?
Yeah. I don't know that I have expectations other than that we're moving in that direction to increase teacher compensation. But I know that there will be a differentiated component to it, that we will be working with legislators and stakeholders to work the issue as hard as we can. But unfortunately, I don't have the crystal ball on that one.
And what can you really do to address the truancy? Obviously, poverty and at-home things play into that, but how do you get kids
Well, that's a great question. I think there's two sides to that one. You know, part of it is reactive and part of it is proactive. So on the reactive side, you know, we've got to get school administrators, parents, the judicial system. We've got to get everybody on the same page. When I went to the STAR task force meetings, the first thing I asked for was, where's the process flow diagram? Just give me a visual that shows how this thing works. Who are all the players? What happens when a kid is unexcused absence for 1 day, 2 days, 5 days? There's kids that are 50 days out, right? What's the appropriate step, you know, and who gets engaged? That's what I got. So we need a formal process, number one. And understand, too, it's going to vary all across the state because resources are different. But we need to have a uniform process so that expectations are clear for parents, for teachers, for the judicial system, right? And for kids, right? It's got to be a priority. School, it's got to be cool, okay? So that's I just gave you the reactive side. So the proactive side is school's got to be cool, okay? And I spoke to that a little bit in my comments, but basically, kids like the social aspect, right? They want to go find their friends, okay? School's got to be a friendly place. So how do you do that? Stop and think about all the technology that's available today. The drones, the robots, aquaponics, all these different ways that you can bring experiential learning into the school. School's got to be interesting. Like I said, they all got the phone, right? They need to see the hands-on application. That's what this generation is looking for. So we got to be able to create those opportunities. Kids are smart, right? They're sponges. But we got to present the opportunities, and we have to leverage the technology. Yes, sir.
There were a couple of things in your prepared remarks that struck me. One was the data on the homicides that I think was like 90% of either the victims or the perpetrators did not have a ninth grade education.
Right.
And then later in your remarks, you mentioned truancy.
Yep.
So how do you address the truancy problem and keep kids in school? I mean, you're not going to go take ninth graders off the street and put them in jail. But what are you doing about the parents and the guardians? And then is that a role for the board, or is that a role for police or prosecutors? How do you attack that?
Well, yeah, well, I think you go back to the previous question, you know, how do you manage truancy? The board is a policy-making group, right? So we're not going to be enforcing truancy. We're going to establish the policy. But we have to reach out to all of the groups that are involved in this. Again, the teachers, the school administrators, the judicial system, and the parents. And there's got to be a standard that everybody understands. This is the rules of the game, right? If I'm out of school unexcused 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, this is what happens. And people have to be held accountable for that. Right now, that's not very clear, as I understand it, across the state.
So, I mean, you want to put parents in jail if their kids aren't going to school?
I'm not advocating for putting parents in jail for kids not going to school. I think that's something that we'll have to work through with the policy. But we have to hold them accountable, certainly. You know, school is required. But, you know, I'll give you a counter to that, too. I gave the example, you know, in my prepared remarks. By definition, a school is a building that has teachers in it, okay? If you don't have teachers in the building, is it really a school? So we got to address the teacher issue, too, so that, again, so that school is the cool option, and that's what gets kids off the street. Give them a hot meal, a good meal, give them the social environment, and cool toys to play with at school, and the technology that's available out there. That's a lot better than staying at home when I don't have those things. So we've got to again be proactive as well as reactive. We got to make school the cool choice, and then if people don't want to play the game, there's accountability for that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you think this AI tutoring concept you mentioned has the potential to alleviate the need for so much remediation? And will testing and evaluation methods have to change?
I would say yes to both of those. So first of all, you stop and think about it. The kids in the classroom, I taught high school calculus and physics for 1 year, okay? I don't know if the kids learn more or I learn more. But there was a lot to being a first-year teacher from that experience. But what you learn is kids that don't know, they don't want to be embarrassed because they don't know, right? None of us want to be embarrassed about what we don't know. So they're not going to ask the question. But what if they have their own individual tutor that nobody else can see? And I don't understand something, I just ask my tutor. My tutor gives me the answer right there. So now the kids got past that barrier, and they can move on to the next step. They can keep up. I think that will significantly help the remediation issue. I think it's going to be a game changer. And your other question was, is it going to change testing? It's definitely going to change testing, because that goes back to the first comment about AI, and that's the ethics component, right? So I take classes at Vanderbilt today, and AI is an issue. They tell you clearly, you can use it here, you can't use it there. There are things they can check to see if you're using it or not. So it'll definitely make a difference, but you have to get the rules of the game in place, and right now that's a really gray area for most schools. Yes, sir.
I've been a big supporter of Khan Academy since it started. Delighted that you met with Sal Khan a couple of weeks ago. Did you bring up, I'm sure you did, but we may not have heard it at this back table. Did you bring up the teacher shortage with him, and did he have any suggestions on how his product, Khan Academy, could maybe assist with the teacher shortage of 1,000?
I think that's exactly what the tutor does. I think that's exactly what it does. Because now, you stop and think about it, if I'm a teacher and I've got a heterogeneous classroom, I got some kids that are off the charts, and I got some kids that are really struggling. I got to manage that whole spectrum of kids. I'm one person, right? That's very stressful. It's very time consuming. The students aren't getting the best out of the experience. But now, if every kid has their own individual tutor, and I'm the teacher, now a lot of that stress is relieved, right? So you take a lot of that stress away from teachers, you take away these extra responsibilities that teachers have today, and they can just go in and teach. Then they can really find their passion again, right, about what they enjoy, because they're teaching. And they don't have to spend their time with all these other stressful activities or distractions. So I think it's going to be a game changer, and I'm a huge fan. Yes, ma'am. So every kid now has a laptop, right? So every kid has a laptop. They open up their laptop. They click on Khan Amigo, and the program comes up. And then on the bottom right, there's an icon over there for tutor. And you click on the tutor. The student has a question, they type in their question. And then they get an immediate response. They have another question, type in another question. They get an immediate response. And for me, when I went through it, and he told me, he said, I want to say in the last 6 months, he said they had 30 revisions on the software. So that tells you how quickly it's progressing. The technology is progressing so fast. They're not going to just dot an I and cross a T and call it Rev 2. So there are a lot of significant changes that are being made, and the technology is moving extremely fast. But all the student has to do is be able to type in the question, and they get an answer. And again, it's very personable. It's very human-like. It's very considerate, very thoughtful. It's not just, here's the answer. That's to me speaks a lot. It's going to speak a lot to students because I think they're going to respond really well to it.
But they have to read.
They do have to read. Yes, they do have to be able to read. But what I would share is that just like your phone or your word processor, you got spell check on everything, right? So you don't have to be perfect with your script. It's very very adaptable. Yes, sir.
So there's been some concerns raised, maybe more so in other states, about students allegedly being exposed to supposedly inappropriate material in school. Does BESE feel like that's any sort of an issue in Louisiana?
Well, we don't want it to be an issue, that's for sure, right? And I know that most schools that I'm aware of, they have filters that protect against that, just like we do in our homes. I couldn't tell you specifically what the standard filter is, but I'm sure filters are in place. And as the AI technology's rolled out, that's one of the considerations as well, right? Is individual student privacy, And that's one of the things that, as we work through the rules of the game, that's one of the things that has to be considered.
Any other questions?
On this truancy issue, does the child welfare department interact with you, or you working with them, or how's that work?
Well, they wouldn't interact directly with BESE. Again, BESE is just a policy-making agency. And going back again to my earlier comment, I don't think there's I haven't seen a standard across the state. So in some cities, the answer might be yes. In others, it might be no. Again, I get back to, I haven't seen the standard yet across the state. And that's where the gap is, in my mind.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morris.
Thank you.